When Kareem Tolliver first walked through the doors of Millstone High, there was no warm welcome, no curious stares, and certainly no excitement. He was just another transfer student, slipping into the school halfway through the semester. His clothes were plain, an old hoodie, a worn backpack, and he moved with the quiet caution of someone who had learned the value of silence. At Millstone, students wore designer sneakers, spoke with loud confidence, and walked like they owned the hallways. Kareem, on the other hand, kept his head down. He wasn't afraid, just familiar with how things worked in unfamiliar places. Coming from Detroit, he had been taught by experience and by his uncle to move invisible, to stay out of sight and avoid unnecessary attention. It was a survival tactic more than a personality trait. He didn't speak much, didn't show off, and didn't try to fit in. On his first day, he entered his math class quietly, took the empty seat in the back and said nothing. No introductions, no whispers. Just a kind of cold indifference from both students and teachers. Kareem didn't take it personally. He didn't expect anything else. For him, silence was normal. In fact, silence had often meant safety. He had no interest in standing out, only in getting through the day. But Millstone wasn't Detroit, and despite his best efforts to remain invisible, some people saw his quiet as a challenge. And in places like that, silence can quickly become a target. Despite Kareem's efforts to stay invisible, it didn't take long for him to become a target at Millstone High. His silence, his second-hand clothes, and his quiet presence made him stand out in all the wrong ways. The bullying began subtly at first. Sideways glances at his worn hoodie, quiet whispers in the hallway, but it quickly escalated. On the third day, while eating lunch alone, Kareem became the subject of public humiliation. Brock Simmons, a popular football player, mocked Kareem's lunch in front of a crowd, joking that it looked like something from the Great Depression. His friends laughed loudly. Some students joined in, others looked away in discomfort. Kareem didn't respond. He quietly walked away, refusing to take the bait. But silence didn't protect him. Later, someone knocked his books off a desk in class, and "charity case" was scrawled across his locker. No one admitted to it, and no one stepped in. Kareem, having grown up in tougher environments, held his ground without retaliation, but the attacks only intensified. Brock and his friends saw Kareem's calm as defiance, and they began to view him as a threat. His quiet became a blank canvas for their assumptions. Rumors spread that he had a criminal record, that he had been expelled from previous schools. In truth, Kareem just wanted to be left alone, to graduate peacefully. But at Millstone, his background, his silence, and the way he carried himself made people uncomfortable. They didn't know his story, but they created one for him. In a school that valued loudness, conformity, and polished appearances, Kareem's quiet resilience became something to fear, twist, and attack. And for the bullies, especially Brock, the idea of someone like Kareem not shrinking away was simply unacceptable. Even as the bullying escalated, Kareem refused to be pulled into the chaos. Every shove, every insult, every cruel joke thrown his way was met with silence, composure, and a quiet exit. He didn't yell back, didn't report anyone, and didn't try to defend himself with words. Instead, Kareem carried the lessons his Uncle Reggie had drilled into him back in Detroit. Never let anger lead. Each day after school, he went straight to his uncle's gym, a modest space tucked behind a tire shop on the edge of town. There, on the worn mats that smelled of leather and sweat, Kareem released the tension. Not through confrontation, but through focused training. His strikes were sharp, his movements controlled, never wild or fueled by rage. He wasn't trying to prove he was tough. He was trying to stay grounded. Back at school, his refusal to react only fueled more rumors. Some called him strange, others said he was hiding something dangerous. Brock and his crew kept pushing, petty pranks, threats, veiled insults, But Kareem remained steady, never giving them the reaction they craved. His silence wasn't weakness, it was discipline. And yet, in a place like Millstone High, where loud confidence was currency, Kareem's quiet strength was seen as defiance. His choice to walk away from conflict didn't earn him respect. It made him a target. But Kareem understood something most of his peers didn't. Real power doesn't need to be loud, and true control often looks like stillness. While others mistook his calm for fear, Kareem knew exactly what he was doing, preserving his future, protecting his peace. What they didn't realize was that he wasn't incapable of fighting back. He just chose not to, because staying silent took more strength than swinging ever would. The moment Kareem finally defended himself behind the gym, everything changed, but not in the way it should have. Though he had only reacted after being cornered and physically attacked by 3 students, including Brock, the narrative that spread afterward painted him as the aggressor. A grainy, edited video, posted from Brock's burner account, circulated online, cutting out the part where Logan swung first. What remained was a few seconds of Kareem moving with precision and calm, enough to frame him as dangerous. The captions called him a threat, and the comments ranged from mocking to fearful. "He thinks he's in a movie," one read. "He's not like us," said another. The school didn't ask questions. They responded with increased security and a formal disciplinary hearing. For Kareem, it felt like justice had no place here. He hadn't started the fight, and yet he was the one under scrutiny. He hadn't posted anything, hadn't tried to defend himself online. His silence now became a liability. Teachers looked at him differently, students kept their distance, and some even believed the rumors that he had a violent past or carried a weapon. None of it was true. The truth didn't seem to matter. Brock, with his polished image and social capital, could twist the story freely, and people listened. Kareem, on the other hand, had no platform, just his word, and in a biased system that wasn't enough. The hardest part wasn't the hearing itself. It was realizing that his calm, his restraint, and even his truth were being used against him. For a moment, Kareem questioned everything. He had done the right thing, yet he was the one sitting under a microscope. In the eyes of the school, it seemed, his presence, not his actions, was the real threat. Just when it seemed like Kareem's fate had already been decided by whispers and a distorted video, an unexpected voice stepped forward. Delaney Foster. She was the kind of student most people overlooked. Quiet, artistic, always sketching in her notebook, rarely speaking in class. But on the day of the fight, Delaney had been near the back of the gym, drawing the dumpsters for an art project. She hadn't meant to witness anything, but she saw everything. How Kareem had been ambushed, how he warned the others to back off, how he only reacted in defense. For days, she stayed silent, afraid of becoming a target herself. But as the school moved forward with a disciplinary hearing and the weight of injustice became impossible to ignore, Delaney made a choice. She approached Kareem quietly at lunch and told him the truth. She'd seen it all, and she was ready to speak up. It wasn't about being brave, it was about doing what was right. At the follow-up hearing, Delaney's voice trembled, but her words were clear. She told the board what really happened, unfiltered and honest. Her testimony shifted the entire tone of the room. For the first time, someone besides Kareem stood up for him. Not with fists or rumors, but with facts. Her courage cracked the false narrative wide open. Though she had no obligation to get involved, Delaney understood that silence in the face of wrongdoing made her complicit. By speaking out, she didn't just defend Kareem. She exposed the truth and forced the school to see what it had been blind to. In a story filled with noise, her quiet honesty became the loudest statement of all. Sometimes, it only takes one person choosing to do the right thing to change the entire outcome. Although the school board ultimately cleared Kareem of any wrongdoing, The victory felt hollow. The official statement confirmed he had acted in self-defense, but the damage had already been done. At Millstone High, perception carried more weight than truth. Students no longer mocked him, but they didn't talk to him either. Instead of ridicule, he was met with avoidance. Eyes averted in the hallways, empty space around him at lunch, silent tension in the classrooms. He had gone from invisible to infamous, and neither felt much like belonging. Brock kept his distance, no longer boasting, but quietly nursing his bruised pride. Logan returned to school but avoided Kareem entirely. Ty found a new group to sit with. The shift was subtle but undeniable. People feared what they didn't understand, and Kareem's calm strength now made him unpredictable in their eyes. At home, Kareem tried to act like everything was normal, but the emotional weight lingered. He hadn't wanted a fight, and now he was known only because of one. He told his uncle, "I didn't even go hard," to which Reggie replied, "I know. But they don't care, because you exposed something in that boy, and he's not ready to face it." Kareem wasn't sure what hurt more, the fight itself, or the way it rewrote who he was in everyone's minds. He had done everything right. He had followed the rules, stayed silent, and walked away, until he couldn't. And even then, he showed restraint. But in the end, none of that seemed to matter. Now he walked the halls not as a student, but as a symbol of fear, of misunderstanding, of silent resistance. And while he may have won his case, Kareem was left wondering if justice ever truly feels like peace. When Kareem was invited to speak at the student-led assembly, his first instinct was to say no. The idea of standing in front of the entire school, the same students who had laughed at him, spread rumors, and later feared him, felt overwhelming. But something inside him knew this was his chance. Not to clear his name, that part was already official, but to reclaim his voice, his story, and his place at Millstone High. On the day of the assembly, he stepped onto the stage with no script, just a quiet resolve. The room fell silent as he approached the mic. He began honestly, admitting that many students saw him as quiet, weird, dangerous. He didn't sugarcoat his experience. He spoke about what it was like to be judged without being known, to be labeled without ever having spoken a word. "I didn't come here to fight anybody," he told them. "I came here to finish high school." His words weren't loud, but they carried weight. He shared how in Detroit staying silent was survival, but here that silence had become a reason for suspicion. He reminded them that everyone carries stories, struggles, and histories that don't always show on the surface. And more than anything, he asked them to think before judging, to ask instead of assuming. By the time he finished, the room was still, until the applause slowly began to build, not out of obligation, but out of respect. In that moment, Kareem wasn't a rumor or a threat. He was a young man who had endured, who had stood his ground, and who had found the courage to speak. His voice, once drowned out by fear and misunderstanding, finally rang clear, and that clarity rippled through the auditorium, sparking something more powerful than fear: understanding. Even after the assembly and the official verdict clearing his name, Kareem knew things at Millstone High would never fully return to normal. But something had shifted. The air in the hallways felt different, not lighter, but more aware. Students didn't laugh at him anymore. They didn't mock him or challenge him, but they didn't quite welcome him either. Still, Kareem noticed small changes: teachers stepping in when they hadn't before, younger students standing up for one another in moments where silence once ruled. It wasn't a revolution, but it was a start. One afternoon, as Kareem was putting books into his locker, Delaney passed by and gave him a quiet wave. No words, just acknowledgement. And that was enough. Later that week, a younger student approached him in the courtyard and asked, "Can you teach me how to not be scared anymore?" Kareem paused, then smiled and said, "First lesson, stand tall, even when it feels easier to shrink." It wasn't about teaching punches or kicks. It was about teaching strength, the kind that comes from knowing your worth. Though the bruises had faded and the rumors had quieted, Kareem still carried the weight of what happened. Healing, he realized, wasn't quick. It came slowly, in small gestures and quiet moments. He didn't want to be seen as a fighter or a threat, just as someone who stood his ground and helped others do the same. And sometimes that's how real change begins, not with noise, but with quiet strength. Life has a way of testing our character not in grand moments, but in quiet, unseen battles. Kareem's story reminds us that dignity isn't found in how loudly we speak, but in how we carry ourselves when no one stands beside us. In a world quick to judge based on appearance, background, or silence, the real strength lies in restraint, patience, and self-respect. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't bring applause. It brings isolation. But truth, like courage, often walks a lonely path before it's recognized. For older generations who've witnessed injustice, endured misjudgment, or chosen peace over conflict, this story reaffirms a timeless truth: that integrity is its own quiet legacy. And just as Kareem's strength eventually inspired those around him, our own resilience, whether noticed or not, can become a light for others. In the end, the lesson isn't just about standing tall in the face of adversity. It's about knowing who you are even when others try to define you. It's never too late to speak up for what's right, to stand by someone who's alone, or to lead by quiet example. These are the values that endure, far longer than the noise of judgment ever will.